So we are live now, and you know what? This is the first time we've, I think, live streamed from this apartment, and we're live streaming from our apartment in El Salvador. I don't have those proper SM7B mics that every podcaster has, but we need to get a pair for the set here, the live stream set in El Salvador, Max.
Oh, I've got a pair.
You've got a pair, right? Indeed. So, I don't think the audio is as good as like with the one of those, mics that everybody does. But, we've been busy, but I've been keeping track. It's so weird to be in Bitcoin paradise where Renaissance 2.0 is happening, Enlightenment 2.0 is happening, and just watch the carnage out in the rest of the world. The crypto carnage, the fiat fraud carnage, everything is just so corrupt everywhere you look, and it's astounding, and every day it gets worse and worse. It's just breathtaking. So we finally had to come on and say, you know what, forget waiting for a Max and Stacy report episode from the professional studio and all that. We're gonna just do a live stream now and talk about this catastrophe that we're seeing unfolding every day.
Yes, there is a great deal of carnage in various markets, and spectacularly in the crypto market. And we've been buying Bitcoin since 2011 when it was $1. We've seen the rise of things like the altcoins, then the ICOs, then DeFi. And with each wave, it gets even more scandalous and corrupt. And the FTX Sam Bankman-Fried story is the culmination, really, of 12 years building in this crypto space. And it's taken down not only the crypto world, but it's kind of spilling over into the other markets around the world as well, I would say.
The title of this episode, this Microdosing Death Row Girlfriends and Crypto Bag Holders, the reason why I use that title is because I tweeted this morning something about Ted Bundy, which made me look him up on Wikipedia because, he was executed in 1989 in Florida. He was a serial killer. And, it's been since the 80s since I had even thought of him or looked him up. And reading the horrific Wikipedia on the guy, many things stood out to me as a similarity between all his death row girlfriends and the bag holders, apologizing for these, the crypto scammers and wanting them to continue with their scams, right? I had tweeted Ted Bundy was as polite and as charming as any Silicon Valley VC token pumper. They have to be super nice in order to convince you to get into their car, as in the case of Ted Bundy, and or take a hold of their bags, to buy their bags, right? That they're printed out of thin air bags.
Well, it brings up a couple of things. First of all, yes, if you are charming and you're trying to get kind of victims for your serial killing spree, it's going to take some honey and not vinegar. Because you have death awaiting them. If you're a toxic Bitcoin maximalist, we don't need to be nice. We don't need to be kind. We don't need to bring honey to the equation because we know what we know. And either you are willing to put the work in and get to know what you need to know what you need to know, or you don't. And it's just a matter of being motivated to understand that. But I get to your point. So your point is that the Ted Bundy is really, really charming, and in the crypto space, the people who run the biggest crypto frauds are really nice, and they're always giving to charities. And Sam Bankman-Fried was always giving money away as virtue signaling. And what did he say? He said, "Oh, if you just say the proper shibboleths, if you just say the proper social justice warrior verbiage of the day, if you just pay homage to whatever it is that people think is important today, they'll just, accept you, and you'll be able to get past all the regulatory gatekeepers and just do massive frauds."
I want you to move a little tiny bit over here, just so you can...
You want to get me closer?
Right there. That's good. Just so you...
I know. If I'm even an inch away, you get nervous.
So no, I'm going to read the Wikipedia and show you some examples of the similarities, because, you know, there were many experts that had interviewed and studied Ted Bundy after he admitted to 30 killings, right? He killed at least 30 women, but perhaps up to 100. And his modus operandi, he was good looking, handsome, smiling. He always acted vulnerable and sweet and just loving and cuddly, right? He always had either a sling on or a fake cast on his leg, and he would approach, you know, attractive young women, usually students at university, who long straight hair with a part down the middle. He liked that. So he would approach these women, but acting vulnerable, to ask for help to get his books into his car or to open his car door or anything like that. And of course, as soon as they agreed to help him, he would bludgeon them over the head with a crowbar and take them away to a second location, and there do all like that. That's the moment when, like, you agree to the charming guy who says, hey, I've got 8% yield on all of that Bitcoin you have there, that sweet, precious Bitcoin. You want to earn some yield on that, right? And you're like, well, like, all these influencers support them and they seem like nice guys. They're on CNBC. CNBC seems to trust them. They have a nice smile. They look very handsome. They have 800,000 followers on Twitter. Everybody agrees they're nice, and everybody, you know, they're very sweet and charming and funny and cool and tweet really well, like, and a blue check. So they must be good guys, right? So I'm going to give them some of my Bitcoin, and bam, over the head, and you're taking your Bitcoin is taken to a second location where, in the case of the serial killer, he, you know, did all sorts of things like rape and then decapitating at least a dozen women and putting their heads in his house for a while and things like that. Yeah, that's what happens to your wealth. But he got away with this. Ted Bundy got away with it because he was charming and handsome. He was regarded as charismatic and handsome, and exploited this to win the trust of both his victims and society as a whole. Because when his first killing spree happened, the problem he was on the list, the short list of possible suspects, because including his girlfriend turned him in. She recognized him from the composite drawing and said, like, he had weird things going on in his life, and like stockings and axe picks and stuff like that at home, and that didn't make any sense. And they looked at his profile, they looked at his image, they looked at who he was, which was a law student, and he had been on the campaign of some governor, and he was on the council for prevention of crimes in, I think it was Seattle. And in that organization, working under the police force of, like, you know, how to prevent crimes, his department was writing brochures for women on how to avoid rape. So, you know, posing as the guy, like in the crypto space, what they do is they pose as not only friendly and charismatic with a blue check and authoritative because they're allowed to go on CNBC and Bloomberg, but they act like they're Bitcoiners, right? It's all cloaked in Bitcoin, and to give them a veneer of sort of excellence, that they're like, somebody is a law student who's working for the police. He's not going to be a serial killer. A guy who claims to love Bitcoin and thinks Bitcoin is perfect money, and yet he's offering this product where he's you know, actually rehypothecating, which is another word for rape, essentially, is raping your wealth, like stealing your wealth, or at least putting it at serious risk of great harm, as we saw happen with BlockFi, for example. Like, this is the same thing happens over and over.
Right. Well, you get empathy from the victims, right? So that's why in the crypto scam space, they always borrow terminology from the legitimate markets. That's why it's called an ICO, because it kind of sounds like an IPO, which is a more legitimate. They'll call it DeFi, distributed finance. It sounds like finance. It sounds legitimate. And so this is what Ted Bundy was doing. He'll be on a committee just exploring how women can protect themselves from dangerous situations, while he himself is the most dangerous situation going on. So he's trying to create empathy and trying to create the right words to say to make people relaxed and to get them into his web of evil. So that's the thing about it, is that Ted Bundy, it's not that he's driven by anger so much, he's driven by pure evil. And that's like really scary. It's spooky. Like there's pure evil in the world. And I think in the crypto space, these shitcoins, they represent in many cases pure evil. And it really positions Bitcoin really as pure good. And there's like good versus evil drama playing out.
Well, that's what the psychological profile of him, after many, many dozens of psychiatrists and psychologists and whatever experts, criminologists interviewed him. He genuinely felt no guilt, no remorse, that he had done nothing wrong. He, in fact, had wondered why everybody was after him and against him, and he was just a nice guy. And why is this happening to him?
The same thing with Sam Bankman-Fried, right? Yeah. He's maintaining his innocence. The latest quote I just read a few minutes ago was that, he didn't commit fraud, and he's willing to get a new job to try to make back the money that is gone. He doesn't know where it went, but he's going to get a new job, and he's going to make back everybody whole. So his connection to the truth is he's in denial so deep. He's so far removed that it's beyond just being a guy who's psychologically impaired or disturbed. He seems to represent genuine evil. It's like Rosemary's Baby, that movie where Mia Farrow ends up giving birth to the devil. It's like the parents of Sam Bankman-Fried got together and actually gave birth to Satan. And Satan lives in the Bahamas, and he's created the hell that is the FTT token. And we're all in this world suffering as a result of it.
Are they suffering? Because that's the thing, is so Ted Bundy gets found guilty in 3 different trials, sentenced to death 3 different times. And he's there on death row. And what do women start doing? Throwing themselves at him. He got married, had a baby with this woman. She finally left him because he found another girlfriend, some lawyer in Florida who was, I think, part of his defense, or saw him on the news and decided to help him and care about him. And she was this woman who was his girlfriend. The cause of the breakup of his marriage was actually called the victims. So he admitted to 30 murders. Only 20 of the bodies were found. And the thing he kept on using as a way to try to delay his execution was that those 10 bodies that they didn't find yet. So he kept on saying to the prison authorities and the courts that he would give them more information. He would give the families information if they just delayed his execution. So they had to go to the families, those 10 families of those 10 women that they hadn't found, and they all rejected it because they said, we know he killed our daughter. She's gone. And but we want him dead. And we know he's just not going to tell us, because he kept on giving them they would delay it, and then they faked that he gave them bad information and stuff like that.
Oh, okay, but you're saying that in the title of this live stream is that women are throwing themselves at this Ted Bundy character. Serial killer while he's in prison. We also saw that with Charles Manson. People would show up, women, and offer themselves to him. I think he also got married in prison. I'm not sure if he...
Yes.
Okay. So the question then is, what's that all about? What is it that, attracts these women to throw themselves at these serial killers? What can we understand more about that?
This is the extent of it. What I'm saying is that, with Ted Bundy, unlike Charles Manson himself inspired all these other lunatics and unhinged people to kill.
Squeaky Fromm, I believe.
Do on these massacres. Whereas Ted Bundy, what he did, it was if you read his Wikipedia, it's gruesome. He had sex with these corpses for days and days and days. They would be out in the woods, and until the animals ate so much of it that there was nothing left there. And what in you goes oh my God, that guy is so hot. I could kind of see some a woman falling for a bad guy who was just a killer, a cowboy.
The bad boy syndrome.
Yeah, it's just from Unforgiven, William Bundy, right?
Yeah, the
like
stuff of
William Money.
pulp novels where it's like she fell for the town loser. She couldn't help it.
The thug, right? Like,
right, but this goes beyond that because he's decapitating women and holding their
corpses
heads
in their head. Like,
right.
Like how do you be
he's
like
beyond a bad boy.
You show up at the guy's house and there are a few heads in the refrigerator.
And somehow your first thought is let's have sex.
Let's have sex.
So what is that? Now, we can't really look at it the other way around. We can't say that would be men throwing themselves on female serial killers because there are really no female serial killers.
Eileen Vernos.
Okay, there's maybe one, but there's not dozens of them. So we can't really go the other way and examine this and equally gender specific. But for some, what would you?
Well, the thing is, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a criminologist. But I'm just a normal human being. And for me, as a normal human being, I'm going to compare this to those who are now cheering for Sam Bankman-Fried or cheering for Alex Mashinsky or cheering for, any of these guys who just rip them off. Like, it's obvious to me. It seems obvious to everybody in our Telegram group. It seems obvious to you. For me, it seems obvious that if a guy has several heads in his refrigerator that are all women that look like you, and that he had sex with corpses wherever their bodies are for weeks.
Okay, so
that would be something you don't.
So
that's not attractive.
The psychological algebra here is you're saying that Mashinsky, getting people cheerleading Mashinsky and really lionizing Mashinsky is equal to these women who throw themselves at serial killers like Ted Bundy.
It seems an obvious thing, like obvious that you don't want to marry a man or date a man or have sex with a man who's just admitted to killing 30 people.
And it should be just as obvious that you wouldn't trust Mashinsky with your Bitcoin.
Yes, and yet or your wealth or anything in that regard. So when you then look at these Twitter streams where you're like, oh my God, wow, like this whole thing collapsed. That's an obvious fraud. It's a Ponzi scheme. And then you go and look at the replies and you're like, what the fuck? Like, there are actually people out there that want them to continue. Yes, let Sam Bankman-Fried start. Rand Neuner was out there. Like, I think this is a great idea that Sam Bankman-Fried should issue a token and come back. And it's like, what?
So Rand Neuner is like
about what
the Squeaky Fromm of serial killers. Or Andrew Sorkin. He's like Squeaky Fromm.
Well, Squeaky Fromm came first. Like, she was like inspired by him before he became a massacre. So this is the person who shows up at Ted Bundy's prison to say, hey, I saw your trial and you just are so fucking sexy. Like, what you did is hot. Like, that's just the sort of person in the reply.
They're turned on by his murderous, decapitating streak.
Well, because obviously, like, those women had some sort of fantasy of being, like, having their head in his refrigerator and having him have sex with their corpse.
Andrew Sorkin, I think that's his name, right? Over there, Andrew
Sorkin, at CNBC.
CNBC. So he's having when he's talking to Sam Bankman-Fried, he's having some kind of sexual fantasy.
No, I'm not comparing those at all. What I'm saying is, this is only for me, Stacy. When I look at the chronicle of what Ted Bundy admitted to and what he was found guilty of, I, Stacy Herbert, look at that and say, wow, I would never want to date that guy. That seems obvious. He's a guy that you don't want to date. And yet there was like a long list of women who showed up to date him or marry him. And then me, Stacy Herbert, who has Bitcoin, and I see, oh, wow, look, all these people lent their Bitcoin to Mashinsky. They lent their Bitcoin to BlockFi. They lent their Bitcoin to these other entities that all blew up. Sam Bankman-Fried, and like an obvious fraud. Like, we see their emails, we see their Slack chats, we see the things they did. We see that they took your customer funds and lent it somewhere else. And I would think like, wow, Stacy Herbert, I have Bitcoin. And I see that and I'm like, well, dude, glad I avoided that guy. And I'll certainly make sure to avoid him.
Well, if everybody was like you, then these scams wouldn't happen.
Exactly.
But people are not like you. What drives these people to be followers of these serial killers and shitcoin scammers? What is it?
Well, I don't know. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it's like,
I can't say.
That's why it's just like astounding that why people, like, if you're out there, I know we keep so many of these scammers out and block people who are stupid enough, because one of the things when all the mods in the Orange Pill Podcast Telegram group, one of the things I always have said is we should kick out anybody who's actually stupid, like because like literally if you know how well, you've done magic tricks and group magic tricks, and you know how hysteria operates. It's like one person who's really dumb shows up in the room. They can infect everybody else with this stupidity, their stupid ideas.
They bring the IQ of the room down.
I think Sam Bankman-Fried having a token. Yes, this makes perfect sense. We have to save this situation. You're like, no, the guy just stole all your money. He stole $10 billion. And
well, a lot of times they're just getting paid, like the Block, right? That's a crypto journalistic outlet, and we find out that they were getting tens of millions of dollars.
But you worked for that guy Maximilian Landano, who'd make a busload of people faint, and it wasn't because he didn't do it to, like, he didn't genuinely make one person faint and then all the rest did. He paid a guy to go in there and pretend to faint. Yeah,
it's similar. Yeah, it's a stooge.
So you have a stooge show up, and they're like, hey, isn't this a great idea? Oh my God, I love it. I want my money back. And everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. And they like abandon reason. And you're like, wait, look at this. Like, it's as obvious to me as it is that obvious to see that those people who showed up to marry Ted Bundy or fall in love with him, despite what you see. I mean, the Wikipedia is so gross. I had to stop reading it.
Yeah, it sounded terrible.
But the same thing with these crypto stories. Like, I had to stop reading it because, like, why should I read that, right? Because why do I need to know all the stuff that Ted Bundy did to me?
Well, let's look at this another way for a second. So the overhead or the cost of committing serial killings that Ted Bundy was engaged in is pretty low. He had some beat up Beetle, a VW. He had some cast for his arm that he, pretended to be injured, and he had a crowbar, right? So the cost of committing serial killing for Ted Bundy was probably $59.99. Okay, that's it. Now, let's look at the crypto market. We know that the cost of committing crypto fraud, because the central bank kept interest rates near zero for so long, is also near zero, you see? There was no barrier to entry for the fraudsters or the criminals or the Sam Bankman-Frieds. They just invited him in, and that he came in and he committed all kinds of havoc.
Again, so I look at this and I was reading the Wikipedia and decided I didn't need to read anymore, because this isn't something that I would ever involve myself in, to marry a person like that or be attracted to a person like that. And the same thing when I look at the crypto carnage, I've made the decision to live in Bitcoin country and work on Renaissance 2.0, on Enlightenment 2.0, and just building better things. So, like, when your incentive model is so bad and so corrupt as it is in crypto, it, like, headline after headline, if it doesn't teach you, or it doesn't even need to teach you, just they're not even, it's like, it's all there out in the open. If in the actual incentive model of their shitcoin or their token or their scam, whatever they're pushing on you, they're openly almost telling you this. So when you see these stories like the Block accepting $27 million from Sam Bankman-Fried, 16 million of it went to the CEO's house in the Bahamas. So, like, that mentality, it's that whole space, it attracts these people who the incentive attracts the bad people, attracts the serial killer, the psychopathic mindset, right? Like, you have to be some sort of sociopath to not feel the guilt, because normal people who aren't sociopaths or psychopaths would feel guilty about taking 16 million of 27 million investment and buying a house and going and living like a lord in the Bahamas.
But the way we started this out, you were saying that across the board, systemically, in every part of the economy, in every part of society, there's breakdown. So clearly there's no institutional representation for a moral or ethical behavior that anyone's paying any attention to. The media is corrupt, and all of the institutions that run the government are corrupt. The financial markets are corrupt, and everything falls into those three categories. All of the kind of the theological institutions have long since been overridden by other contemporary psychologically driven Adderall and other pharmaceutical drugs. They're all gone. And so you're left with this dystopian nightmare, which we're now living through. So the answer to the question is, what is this all systemic crash all about? I would say it's the dystopian nightmare that's now unfolding and before people's eyes. And that's what the phase that we're in.
I have a hard time accepting that because I'm looking out the window, I'm living my life here, and there's no dystopia here. It is not a nightmare. In fact, it's the opposite. It is, like I keep on saying, it is Renaissance 2.0. It is Enlightenment 2.0. Things are getting better. Hope is arriving. GDP is growing. Things are getting better. When things are getting better, that's the opposite of dystopia, right? It's like people feel better. It is better, and your rights are being enhanced. They're being protected.
No, I'm just taking that your opening remarks and trying to put those into context. So if the idea is that things are falling apart, there's systemic collapse, I think it's more than just a 1 or 2 year recession or a once in a 20-year breakdown. It seems more global and more profound. There seems to be a genuine global kind of meltdown, except for this location, El Salvador. That's not happening here.
So I always quote Frederick Bastiat, who wrote the pamphlet "The Law," and outlining the case for law and republic, like the consensus model, right, of how to, what is a legitimate government and what should the government do. And the law, and therefore government, is legitimate if it's just protecting what the individual has the right to protect. And the individual has the right to protect what are endowed to their inalienable rights, unalienable, endowed by the Creator with the rights to life, liberty, and property.
Okay. So you're talking about the law, right? And that's another institution that's totally broken down, because nobody who's in the regulatory offices that govern financial markets are enforcing the law. There's lots of laws in the books that could be used to stop a Sam Bankman-Fried, but nobody is enforcing those laws. So that institution of law and justice is also equally now in disrepair.
So the thing is that when you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages of law and code and text and loopholes, that's not the law. The law is 3 things. These are the words: life, liberty, property. That's it.
Well, that's the philosophical foundation for the law, but there still needs to be some text. The law, for example, Bitcoin runs on 8 pages of law. That's it. Then it runs Bitcoin network, and it's becoming the world global standard. In General Electric, a couple of years ago, they filed their tax return. It was something like 700 pages, and it ended up they didn't pay any tax. As a matter of fact, they were owed a tax, right? So that's too many pages, too many laws, too many loopholes. So all the laws could be condensed to something a lot concise. Okay, that would be great. But when that legal bloat is and central banks not doing their job, you have in walks a guy like Sam Bankman-Fried, who seems to be conceived by 2 people that were trying to birth Satan, to do the work of Satan. And now here it is, we're suffering as a result.
So when I was talking about what was written in the law by Bastiat, the reason why we need the law to protect life, liberty, and property is because those are the 3 things endowed upon the Creator endows us with, that we all have the rights to this. And the reason why we need a law is that, he said, looking back on the previous 3,000 years of history, we know for a fact the nature of humans. We know they will plunder. That's what they do. If they can take your hard work, i.e. proof of work versus proof of stake, he outlines very well in this very short essay, which everybody should download and read. It's available online anywhere for free. So he outlines why it is that proof of work is the ideal situation, that people will work and they're owed their work, their property, their life, their liberty, all the things they build and spend their time and hours creating. But the nature of man is always to want to put their feet up, not work, and take your stuff. So there's all the evidence suggests that that is the nature of humans. And we see that with these incentive models. We see it with the FTT tokens and the layering of all this leverage upon these fabricated out of thin air tokens, whereby they were able to use those tokens to steal a lot of real money, whether it was, you know, your Bitcoin or US treasuries, you know, US dollars that are also layer one money. They were able to steal layer one money using these fabricated tokens. And that is the nature, because when plunder becomes the way of life for a group of men at the top, it trickles down through the law and through the culture itself, and supports this. And you see this all the way. You see this reach its pinnacle during the COVID crisis, when everybody got to work from home. And what does work from home means? It means not work, right? But somebody was having to work to provide some of the food and the gasoline and the heating and the utilities, all the things that need to be maintained, because entropy will take it apart, right? So somebody had to work, but you were being paid these free tokens, trillions of dollars being sent to you by Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And you're meant, somewhere inside, you had to become a sociopath or a psychopath, because you had to not feel guilty about this, about somebody else doing the work for you, that you were getting to lounge around at home in your pajamas and have the highest savings in your entire life. And things were great and your house price was rocketing and things looked amazing. Somewhere you had to make that mental, like, sociopathic leap to justify it in order to continue their day, because 300 million people took that free money and took those PPP loans. And, you know, that's what I'm saying. Is like, that's how it all, that the incentive structure of the fiat system in which they operate has festered into the boiling point, where they then created these FTT and BNB and all these like tokens that are just fabricated out of thin air and create these illusions of these grand new lords and aristocrats who then like quickly falls apart.
Right. And so what we've also seen, since we've been covering these things since 2008, is that every time there is a breakdown of these markets and it exposes them as over leveraged and corrupt, what happens is they simply allow for the credit spigots to be widened and let the same players do the same thing, but much bigger. And we see that play out in the crypto. So here in 2022, you would think, and what you're saying is, you as the individual, it's so obvious that these crimes are being committed.
Yeah.
You as a rational person, it's so obvious that the system is corrupt, and that anyone who thinks sanely would see, you know what? There needs to be either an enforcement of the law,
take the escape hatch,
or some institutional recognition that all of these people are operating as a kleptocracy. But what's coming? Is it going to be another layer of fraud? And the answer is CBDC. Central bank digital currencies are simply Sam Bankman-Fried 10, 20, 30 times bigger. And that's, again, another chapter in fraud.
Because the population thinks they're going to be in on it. That's why it will happen, because they will believe like, well, if the CBDC comes, then I definitely don't have to work for the next 5 years. And who wants to fucking work, right? So it creates this, like, all the things that the ancients taught us about the sins, the deadly sins, like that's encouraged by that system. We must have done this like before, like written history. We must have like had some civilization that got wiped out by these very things, and they probably wrote it down like, never let us do this again. And like, here we are doing it again, except for in El Salvador, where we, you know, that you could see the ethical nature of President Bukele, right? You could see that he made the decision to go with hard money and stay on hard money and be hard money. Like, this is like this is a proof of work economy with no shortcuts and no cheating and no plunder.
Well, there is, you do have a feeling, let's say, when the plane lands in San Salvador and you get off the plane, you have a different feeling. And that is a feeling of being around people who are ethical. And that, in the world today, that's rare. It might be the only place in the world, the only country in the world that actually has made a dedicated effort of the highest ethical standards, right? Especially if you're leaving the US and you're going to El Salvador, you're leaving a country where the ethics and morals have reached rock bottom, and you feel it. People are genuinely either horrified by it, or two, sickened by it, or three, trying to game the system, right? As to your point there, CBDCs will be seen as my chance to cash in on fraud, because you know how they'll introduce it. They'll say you have $10,000 at your bank. We're gonna take that and we're gonna give you 100,000 CBDC, and it's gonna be worth approximately $10,000 the way we do the conversion rate. But of course, you'll say, oh, 100,000, that sounds good. And now it is. You got 100,000 CBDC, which is this new programmable fiat money where, as the story came out today in China, as I've been saying now for years, one of the features of the CBDC is that it will expire after a year or two, like a frequent flyer mile, unless you spend it. Because they want you to spend. They don't want you to save. If anybody who has individual sovereignty is a threat to the CBDC cartel, so they'll just expire. It'll be like, oh, where's my money? Boop. Sorry, your $1,000 expired yesterday. And that's the beginning of, I would think, a very problematic situation.
It's just unethical versus ethical versus unethical. And we don't really teach that anymore. So basically, the system itself is unethical. And in terms of the US, for example, it forced everybody to become unethical. It was difficult. So like with those PPP loans, and you see all these crypto guys took those PPP loans, millions of dollars. It was covered a few years ago, 2 years ago, when the information was revealed through public access to this information, rights to the public information, freedom of information. So a lot of crypto billionaires, on paper, on their paper token, took millions and millions of dollars. And they justified it because every psychopath or sociopath has to justify it, why they deserve this free plunder. Because it is plunder, right? Because that's what printing money is. But you see how the government induced you to become as corrupt as they are. Because if you are as corrupt as they are, you can't complain about them.
No.
And you saw that with Joe Biden publishing all the legislators who had received some of this funds. Now they tried to induce us to take it. And I didn't even know, by the way, that this information would become public, that who accepted these loans would become public. So when they circumvented the law to issue these PPP loans, you have the headline one of like everybody, like families who made less than $120,000 or something. They got like thousands of dollars sent in a check to their house. Then there was the PPP loan, which was like for the upper middle class and the upper class people and the billionaires and the paper billionaires, like the crypto guys. So what this was that because it was not the executive branch was issuing it, not Congress. Congress wouldn't vote to print all this money, but they didn't want to create new money. So what they did is they created these loans, which then could become forgivable, and in order to circumvent the law in the United States about who can print money. So they instead called it a loan, even though it was creating new money. So they created these loans, but in order to get it out fast enough, because there's no infrastructure for the executive branch to issue this money, because remember, they're not going through Congress and they're not able to go through the IRS for this. So what they did is they went to the banks and they said to the banks, you will be exempt from all liability if any of these are taken fraudulently. You have no liability. So, but you're going to get a cut of everything. So they bring the banks in, commit fraud, because you're not going to be charged with anything. You get a cut of as much money as you can lend out. So they were lending out, especially to their best customers, and it was a quid pro quo, like saying like, hey, you spend a lot here, you have a lot of money here, so here's some more money, and keep your business here. So even if it's fraudulent. So when they said to us, like, it was like close to $2 million here, you could have $2 million for free. It's like, it's just free money because you don't have to repay it. But on the front page, it said, by accepting this, you agree that you need this money, otherwise you would go out of business. And if that's not the case, then this is fraudulent. It's a felony crime for you to accept this. And I was like, well, we don't need it. It would be nice to have $2 million in free dollars, right? Whatever. But Bitcoin was $3,000 then. But I was like, well, we don't need it. And they pushed it on us like 3 times. Never took it because it was, it was your ethics. You're confronted with this ethical decision to take. Do you participate in the plunder? We could have bought a lot of Bitcoin for 2 million was 3,000 divided into 2 million. How many Bitcoin could we have bought? That's what a lot of people did. But we didn't. And then it emerged, everything got published afterwards. So you could see who were these unethical people. And yet there was no cost to them. People kept on pouring money into their crypto schemes, even though it emerged that they were unethical people.
Yeah, now they're going after these people.
Some of them.
As we predicted, that they would be used as essentially entrapment. So politically, the people who were against forgiving the student loans, the Democrats went into the Republican side and said, well, you took PPP loans fraudulently, right? So they used it as a political weapon,
yes,
which was going to be obvious at the time also. And again, just another layer of fraud.
But even that's what all those the crypto scammers do, right? Is they keep on doubling down and introducing a new fraud when their old one collapses. And if anybody complains, they're like, well, you're a fraud too. So that's why I get to commit this fraud. Or you did that, and that's why I get to commit this fraud. And he's like, no, you're taking an unethical decision in that case. And, I have to say, at Bitcoin 2022 earlier this year in April in Miami, I talked to Michael Saylor for 2 hours at his house. And we were talking about that because just to show you just how profoundly ethical President Bukele is. Because, I was asking Michael Saylor, is a lot of people are saying that, Bitcoin maximalism is, toxic. And look at people like Max and Stacy who are against shitcoiners arriving in El Salvador. And I asked him, I was like, Michael, what do you think? If one of these shitcoin billionaires arrives and offers $1 billion in cash, he goes, it's unethical to accept it because they stole it. It's unethical money. I was he was for 2 hours arguing about ethics and the unethics of participating in that system. And that's what I'm saying is that's what the incentive structure, the incentive model of crypto is. Like Bastiat says, it is when plunder becomes the way of the life of the top. And that's what the guys who issue the tokens, they're the plunderers, the first plunderers, but everybody down becomes engaged in the system because they're looking for the next bag holder. They're looking for somebody to sell it to. It's all MLM, right? All the way down. It's it's fraud all the way down because you it's fraud, and the guy at the top got $1 billion, but maybe you'll get 100 million worth if you could dump it on enough chunks. You have to find more of them, and then they're all saying, well, that guy got 100 million, but maybe I can make 2 million, and if I find many more chunks. So that's what Bitcoin is beyond. It's the next step of Enlightenment 2.0 for sure, because the Enlightenment 1.0 created, these republics, right? Mm-hmm. Where law was written down on paper. But as you said, then you add all these amendments, and then you argue, and then new genders come up, and new classes of people that they decide they should be protected above all others, and their lives mean more than other lives, or it starts to become corrupted because of humans, because of the nature of humans, throughout history, as Bastiat pointed out. But the thing with Bitcoin is the protocol can't be corrupted, right? No matter how greedy you are, matter how much you want to help out your particular friends and not those other friends, or your people and not those people, you can't corrupt it. So we've got beyond that.
It's revealing the corruption. So in that sense, Bitcoin, as I've said, is a magic mirror. It reveals corruption in a very dramatic way. So getting rid of these people now is necessary. You know, with what Michael Saylor and his talking about ethics and things, I mean, he comes from a world of engineering. So, you know, if he was going to build a house and he had a foot measure and somebody told him that he could build the house quicker if he turned it into a 13-inch foot measure, he would say, no, I'm an engineer and I won't be able to build my house if you keep telling me that the basic measurement I'm using to cut my wood and build my house is going to change. As from an engineering perspective, that makes no sense. So, I mean, he's an ethical person from that point of view, that as an engineer, 2 + 2 has to equal 4, and you can't cheat on the numbers. So, I mean, that can be translated into the philosophical idea of ethics. With Bitcoin, because as an engineered, discovery of this perfect money, it resonates with his engineering brain, and so he can talk about shitcoins as being ethically immoral. But keep in mind also that what he's saying is that they're engineered horribly. Every single thing that's not Bitcoin is engineered like dog shit, is what he would love to say. But instead, because he won't use those words, he'll just say they're unethical. But it's the engineering is terrible.
When they say code is law, remember they say that in Ethereum, right? The DAO, that original DAO that got hacked and exposed Ethereum as being totally corrupt from that day that it got hacked, right?
And people are crazy.
And this is as Bastiat said, is like that when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society or in a token offering or a shitcoin, they create over time the legal code and the moral code to justify it. So you see that, to me, is what I started at the top. And so that's sociopathic behavior, that's psychopathic, that's like no remorse, no guilt. And you see it over and over. Like nobody feels guilty about accepting the $4 trillion of free money that was printed when it's pure plunder.
Right. I mean, you see these images now of Walmart just said last week they're going to cut earnings and close stores because of shoplifting.
Shoplifting, yes.
Right? So there's no difference between shoplifting at Walmart and what FTX is doing and what people in the political class are allowing FTX to do by taking the money from FTX. Again, getting back to Bastiat's quote about looting at the top equals looting at the bottom, there is no difference. Everybody's looting, and there's nobody standing up for an ethical or moral agenda anywhere in the supply chain, right? Everyone's looting from everybody.
And look at Kevin O'Leary. He's still on CNBC. He's still there as an expert.
Caught looting.
He's caught taking $15 million from Sam Bankman-Fried to be a spokesperson, and then trashes Bitcoin and promotes these FTT, like FTX sort of tokens. Like, how unethical is that, right?
Well, when I was a stockbroker in the 80s, that would have been fraudulent inducement, and you would have been banned from the industry. That would have happened quickly. But in the 2022, the industry's been so watered down, and the idea of what's inducement has been eliminated, that someone like that can take $15 million, engage in unlawful inducement, and keep his job on CNBC.
But that's what I'm saying, Max. Like, there's Bastiat said the legal code and the moral code. So, okay, the legal code is not there because the lawmakers are corrupt. But so are the people. So are the death row girlfriends and the crypto bag holders. The vast majority of the population, because of course they all hold US dollars as well, the free tokens that got printed by the trillions over the past few years. So the moral code is, why are people willing to tune in to watch Kevin O'Leary now or Andrew Sorkin when he gets Sam Bankman-Fried on and the audience is all clapping wildly for him? Like, that's the moral code. That's the moral decay across the society. So all of them are either the Ted Bundys or the girlfriend showing up to marry them in prison on death row. So like that's the 95%, 98% of the population are one of those two groups.
So you're saying 98% of the population is either Ted Bundy, the serial killer, or the chick who shows up and wants to have sex with Ted Bundy on death row.
Yes.
And that applies to the globe.
That,
except for one country.
Except for El Salvador. Anywhere, well, it depends on it's the same with the Cantillon effect. So the closer you are to the money printer, and the US dollar is the number one of all the fiat. So the closer you are to the New York Fed, and the more, so therefore anybody who is elite or a CEO of major corporations or major banks, any of the political or cultural elites, they're going to be the Ted Bundys. They're going to have the most control and power, right? So the further you are away, El Salvador already had it, right? Because they're already, they were already on a US dollar standard. So for a long time, it's like 20 years, they haven't been able to print their own money. So it already started to change the population anyway. Like they were already becoming more and more ethical because they had to work over the past 20 years. So they were ready. They were primed for Bitcoin in a way.
Well, I mean, it all comes back, as I've been saying for many years now, that there is a certain, you said we're all humans, there's a certain carnal aspect to all interactions, all economic interactions, all human interactions. There's a carnality to it. And when it comes to economics, you can have all the schools of economics, the Austrian school, the Keynesian school. You can look at supply, you can look at demand, you can look at the incentive model. But I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to what I call fuckonomics. That it's all about fuckonomics. And once you understand that, you understand why the chicks throw themselves as serial killer Ted Bundy, and why Andrew Sorkin is giving Sam Bankman-Fried a tongue bath on CNBC.
Well, I mean, the other one was the secret Bored Ape Yacht Club. I don't know. There's some sort of like NFT thing, which was like 30% of the market, and it was all like it's being exposed. Of course,
it got deleted.
No. This is a different one. This is from Yugo Labs. There are some Solana ones that got deleted with the Solana or FTX blockchain and that sort of stuff. But there was the number one NFT that was like 30% of the market was something called BAYC, Bored Ape Yacht Club. And it turns out, of course, that there were hidden secret payments being made to celebrities with millions of followers. And as I said, they're the Ted Bundys. They're the cultural elite that they have the closest access. And they've already done all of the many layers, the huge wall against feeling any guilt for this. So they already feel like they deserve all this plunder. They deserve it because they're uniquely better than everybody else. Whatever it is that they came up with in their mind psychologically to justify the nonstop plunder, that's it. And you see it with a whole bunch of celebrities were secretly paid. This court case, the people are claiming in court that there were secret payments made to pump up the price of these JPEGs to tens of millions of dollars. Oh, gee, I wonder if it was manipulated higher. Seems legit, right? Not. Yeah,
well, you got celebrities, are used to promote products, and then the product became a fake token, and so that's when it spills over into securities laws. So the celebrities are being told, hey, you just endorsed this tennis shoe, you just endorsed you're talking about a new movie that you're starring in, you're promoting this, you're promoting that. Here, we want you to promote something called Bored Ape Yacht Club. And the celebrity's like, whatever, how much do I make? Here's my money, I'm a celebrity. And that's what they think. If they don't understand that, they're talking about securities law, and it's fraudulent inducement to buy and sell a security, which is against the law. So their management, of course, whoever's managing those celebrities should hold some responsibility as well, because they should know something about these laws.
Well, when the JPEG pushers, the JPEG was the equivalent of Ted Bundy putting on the sling. Like, it's like, hey, I'm a cute and cuddly little ape, a cartoon ape. I'm not a security, right? Like, how can you, like, that's what you assume, right? Just like when I told you the story of taking Delta 8, it was a little gummy bear. It was like a cute, sweet little gummy bear. And I was like, how bad could this be? Popped them in and like, woo! Then I went off on a wild goose chase down some rabbit hole into another dimension.
I remember that night.
But like, this is the same thing with these cute little cartoon characters. How could they possibly be a security, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what they were.
Yep, that's all securities. I mean, one thing that's come out now is the revulsion toward anything but Bitcoin, because it's no longer a debate about whether or not these are centralized, unregistered securities. I think that story is getting out there, and people now, hopefully, a lot of people lost a lot of money, but hopefully they learned something. I know us toxic Bitcoin maximalists are saying offensive things to your ears, and it'll upset your cozy little bubble of gummy bears and rainbows. But the fact is, everything that's not Bitcoin is a centralized, unregulated security. And the SEC, after being asleep at the switch for a number of years, is coming after you. And the thing about the SEC is that they've got all the time and resources in the world. People think, well, they didn't go after these things when they came out a year ago, 2 years ago. That doesn't mean anything. They just sit around the office all day and they just figure out, you know what, we got all the time and money in the world to go after these guys. And now they're going after everybody. So, you might have to ring. Hello, better call Saul. Yeah, guess what? I'm arrested.
At the end of the day, it's life, liberty, and property. And all of that is about you, the individual. And only you, the individual, can decide what you want to do and how ethically or unethically you want to live, right? So when I'm toxic, it's not about you. I really don't give a shit because I can't control what you do. You're the one that's going to decide to be unethical. And time is so short. Like, it's finite in terms of how much time you're allowed to be here on Earth. So do I want to waste an hour or 2 hours or 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years of my life trying to convince a random guy with a random handle on Twitter to not buy one of these Bored Ape Yacht Club tokens that Madonna is secretly being paid to push? Do I need to waste my time? Like, when I'm on my deathbed, am I going to probably say, well, I wish I had wasted 3 years on trying to convince that guy?
Bitstein wrote a great piece this last week, essentially talking about this, that toxic Bitcoin maximalism can be summed up in one word: no.
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, it's self-preservation. Is like, as long as, like, if I look like a bitch, maybe Ted Bundy, like, hobbling along, doesn't want to even bother with that bitch. I'm not going to ask her. She doesn't look like a nice person. I'm going to ask the woman who's like eager for my approval, like eager for like everybody to like them, right? I'm like, well, it's a protective mechanism for me, myself, because I can only take care of myself. That's all I have control of, and that's all I really care about, because that's, at the end of the day, all I have time for is like me and what I'm doing in my life. So I would rather not be approached by cuddly, sweet guys like Sam Bankman-Fried, or, nice guys who want to buy my lunch like Mashinsky. Like, I don't want that. I don't need that in my life. And you can do it if you want to. That's your choice. But at the end of the day, you have to make your own decision. And that's what the purpose of the law, though, is to protect you and your right to make your own decisions, that you shouldn't be forced to participate in these plundering schemes. You shouldn't be plundered by these guys, whether it's Ted Bundy or, Sam Bankman-Fried.
Well said. I think the people are going to get a lot out of this, and we'll start the new week with a new spirit of toxicity and malintent, which is always helpful in a world flooded with shitcoins and fiat money.
Yeah, so just say no, or...
Just say no to shitcoins.
Just say no, or go down to death row and find yourself a serial killer husband.
Great advice. Well, I guess that's about it for this episode.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.